Hello, everyone, and welcome to So, What's Your Process? The show where we talk with creatives from all different kinds of fields about what they do and how they do it. I'm Allie Dalsimer.
I'm Kyle Dalsimer.
And who do we have for our first guest?
Well, we've got a great first guest. He is a filmmaker, actor, and professor. You've seen him on stage in award-winning turns in title roles at world-famous theaters like the Old Globe and the Tony Award-winning Dallas Theater Center. He is a professor of theater and film at Baylor University, and as a filmmaker, he has written and directed multiple critically acclaimed short films that have played all around the world. His new film, Adieu, is his biggest yet, garnering awards and praise at Cleveland International Film Festival, Dallas International Film Festival, the American Black Film Fest, Holly Shorts, DC Shorts, just to name a few. The film is now Oscar eligible 3 times over and stars the iconic and legendary Jenifer Lewis. Please welcome to the show, my friend and yours, it's Sam Henderson.
Hello, welcome, Sam. We are really very excited to talk with you today. Now, we met you, Kyle and I met you at the DC Shorts Film Festival, and we got to see Adieu, which is amazing. And we're definitely going to have you talk to us about that film. I had one question before you actually talk about the film. I asked you when we had the talk back. And I thought your answer was great. And I thought it'd be wonderful if our audience heard it. So I'm going to ask the question, but then I want you to talk about the film and then answer the question.
All right.
So the question I asked was, what did you learn from creating this film, from making this movie that you hadn't expected?
Yeah, you're the one who asked that question. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the very kind intro and the kind words about the film. I appreciate that greatly. Yes, what did I learn making Adieu? I think I told you succinctly, I learned what I wanted to be when I grow up. It's only taken 40 plus years to figure out. But as I'm sure we'll get into, the Adieu filmmaking process was a bit arduous. It was definitely laborious. It took a while, even for something that now amounts to about 15 minutes, incubated for 18 months plus before, it was any sort of reality. And so when I got to the end of that process, as is typical, I did learn a lot about myself. But the most important thing that I learned was that I wouldn't mind it if I had to do it all over again. And that was really, I'm not going to say this is my 5th short. I'm not going to say the other shorts that I made led me to believe that I'd never do it again or that I didn't want to do it. It was just something about this process, going through it for the 5th time or the past 10, 11, 12 years, that really kind of solidified for me, this is something that I want to pursue more intentionally over the long term, more specifically as that relates to the feature space, to the feature film spaces. I've ever made a feature film. So I'm hoping whatever Adieu does, that it at a minimum allows me the opportunity to continue to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, namely a writer and director, because I discovered how much I've always enjoyed it, but I discovered how much I enjoy it as a result of making this film.
Absolutely. And I think that I speak for anyone who has seen the film when I say that audiences are glad that you are that you've come to that discovery, and we're all very excited to see what you do next. I want to ask you.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about if you can just, for our audience, folks who haven't seen the film yet, if you could tell folks at home just a little bit about the story in general, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yes. So the log line is Miss Hopkins, who's a middle school theater teacher, is rehearsing Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing when the rehearsal is interrupted by a school shooter. So, without giving away too much. If you haven't seen the film, that's about as far as I'm willing to go in terms of explaining, the film. The longer version of the explanation of the film is that there's a face-off between Miss Hopkins, the teacher in the film, played by Jenifer Lewis, and the shooter that results in a discussion about memory and the language of love, without giving away too much about what the result of that face-off is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good teaser. You don't want to give away too much, for sure. I would encourage everybody who's watching this to actually watch it when it comes out. It really is a powerful film. I have so many questions. One of them is the title Adieu.
Yes.
It's obviously from Much Ado About Nothing, which is the play that Shakespeare wrote that's being done. But there's also sort of the general expression about much ado about nothing, people making a big deal about not much. And in sort of ruminating about the film afterwards, I wondered, was there any intent on your part to make a social commentary about the fact that school shootings have become, sadly, so commonplace that we're not paying enough attention to them, that we're starting to treat them as if they are not huge and monumental, but more much ado about nothing?
Oh, wow. That's another great interpretation of the title of the film that I really hadn't thought of. No, that was not my intent with the title at all. I thought it was a bit serendipitous, if you will, that the word adieu was a part of Much Ado About Nothing. And that was I might have talked about it. I've been talking about the short since January, so please forgive me if what I've said before gets jumbled up or if I'm too redundant. But yes, I think I settled on, when I was co-writing the script, this particular play for reasons we get into later. And I didn't want to call the film Much Ado About Nothing, because I thought that would be inappropriate. I toyed around with Much Ado, but Much Ado is intentionally redundant, because ado is much, So, I mean, obviously, as you know, Shakespeare is very clever. And so you have Much Ado, this kind of extreme beginning of a title that ends with, that's in juxtaposition to nothing, right? Shakespeare did a lot with comparison and contrasting. So I know the title is very intentional, but I thought, no, naming after the play, that might not hit it right on. But the word adieu itself carries enough with it, in my opinion, to illustrate what goes on in this short. There's a lot that goes on. There's quite an adieu in the short, and it just so happens that lines up with the play the students and the teacher are rehearsing as well. And so, yeah, I didn't think that deeply about it, Allie. In terms of, however, what I was going for in terms of social commentary, to be quite honest, we really did not want to make a political film. We did not want to make a preaching to the choir film. And even though this character is president of the film, we really didn't want to make a school shooter film. And that's going to be, I admit, that's going to be a difficult thing to ignore. You put a school shooter in a film, that's a very incendiary character, as it should be. But my intent was to make a movie about a teacher, a mentor, a parent. That's what was, I think if in the process it was about, how can we make a different style school shooter movie, that might not have been as appealing to me. I wanted to take the genre or the exploration and perhaps explore it from a different direction, and maybe give more attention to the people who are affected by this occurrence. In particular, the teacher, because I hadn't seen that representation very often or at all. And so, yeah, I know the shooter is a centerpiece, and we shouldn't be desensitized to that. But in terms of what we're going for with the film, we really wanted to, as much as we could, focus on the teacher's experience and the teacher's experience between what's happening with the shooter and the students she's charged with protecting.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think you succeeded in that.
Yeah,
I do.
I think so as well.
Thank you.
I want to, since we touched on it briefly, I would love to talk about the decision to come to Much Ado About Nothing for your, there's obviously, dozens of Shakespeare plays you could have gone with. There's also, thousands of other plays in general. What did you always know it was going to be Shakespeare? Did you always know it was going to be Much Ado About Nothing? And what sort of led you to feeling like that was the right framing device for such a tense story?
So this happened through a process of elimination. As you've stated, I'm a classically trained actor, and so I've done quite a bit of the canon. And so I started with, I know I wanted to have what is, in my opinion, the greatest stuff written in the English language. And how fortunate are we that it is public domain? So, it's somebody else's brilliant words that I don't have to come up with. And so I knew I wanted Shakespeare in the film, first of all. And so I went from that to, as you pointed out, alluded to, Kyle, about half the canon is performed anyway. They're Shakespeare plays we just don't do. So I didn't want to choose anything that was too obscure, that no one would have no relationship to, like, King John or Richard II, we don't do very often.
Mm-hmm.
And so that narrowed it down. What are the ones we normally do when we get past Hamlet and the Scottish play and Romeo and Juliet, so on and so on. And then I thought, well, I probably don't want to do a tragedy, a history, right? It seems like a drama on top of a drama would be a bit too much, a little bit too on the nose if they were, doing Titus Andronicus and then a school shooter. It just seems like it was a little bit too heavy-handed. The movie's heavy enough. Maybe the play they're doing doesn't need to be as heavy. And so I removed histories and tragedies. So that narrows it down to a pool of 7 or 8-ish that we do regularly in terms of Shakespeare's comedies. And so I begin to think about the comedies that we do often, and I got to pretty quickly Much Ado About Nothing, because secondarily, I think it's really funny, even though this is not a funny film. I think it's very funny that a lot of middle schools, when they do Shakespeare, my son's school just did this a couple of years ago, they choose Much Ado About Nothing. And I think that's interesting. I think that's funny, because of all the plays I just talked about, Much Ado About Nothing is perhaps Shakespeare's filthiest. It is a really, really dirty play.
Very body.
And it is really, if we understood what they were saying, it's probably not a play teachers would choose to do in middle school. All right. It is filthy. And I've always gotten a kick out of kids doing it, because they probably really shouldn't.
A moment of social commentary.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, if you want another kind of third, tertiary work layer, the students are already being charged with something in my film that they probably shouldn't be doing or having to face anyway. But it's a play we do all the time for the kids. We think it's funny and it's cute, and it's got a big cast, but it's pretty dirty. So I've always been amused by that. And so I landed on Much Ado About Nothing because this gets done quite often. And so I started swimming through the passages just from recall, and then going through and looking at them specifically, trying to find a moment that I thought would be appropriate to reinterpret. And again, not to give away too much, there's a particular passage in Act 4 with one of the characters that when I was rereading the play and looking for something that would work in my script, just hit me like a ton of bricks in terms of what it's saying in the play, in the intent of the context of the play, and how it also works with the conversation that I'm attempting to explore with the characters in my film. It was, yes, a bit of it was, maybe a great deal of it was luck that I happened to stumble upon this passage that just so happens to work perfectly with the moment I was trying to articulate in my film. So long answer, but this is about process. I mean, the process for the play and landing on the play was really began with a process of elimination, right? And then, landing on a little bit of luck in terms of the specific language that I ended up using.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that I think it was probably the best pick for the job. It really does work so seamlessly.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it really it's almost haunting how and I obviously no spoilers, but it really does feel almost perfect. And I know I listened to an interview that you did a little while back where you talked about how Shakespeare is still relevant because at his core his writing is about humanity. And while he may
100%.
not have ever would have no concept of a school shooting,
right,
the humanity that he wrote about still resonates today because we are still human.
100%. And this is serendipitous as well, but I got my cake and eat it too, that because it's a comedy, right, as we talked about, that ends up getting used in a tragic situation. And so it just further, explains how malleable that language is, how many contexts that language, that's a single passage in a single play that's getting stretched, to fit a context in an environment that's over 500 years removed from the author's intent, and it works. I think that's just the hallmark of something that is brilliantly written.
Yeah, absolutely. Building on that, and that idea of process there, I want to know. I mean, you are, as we've discussed, you are a classically trained actor. You're an award-winning actor. You're and I wonder how that training, that background, translates when you go to write. As someone who's also an actor who's stepped into screenwriting, I found that there's such an interesting layer of intersection between that acting process and building a character as a performer, and building a character and characters as a writer. So I'm wondering if you found any crossover there.
Yeah, Kyle, I've thought about this a lot this year in particular, just because of what my background is, what I teach, and as I open this up, talking about what I want to do when I grow up, and how all of those things collide, and how my experiences and my background, both academically and professionally, have led up to this conversation and to this film that I've made. I've thought a lot about this. And I've landed on one thing specifically that I think is applicable to me and applicable to all artists who might have shared the same shared experiences as I have. I think what's important about the training, your experiences, again, irrespective of artistic background, is if you go through a certain amount of training and you're serious about it, the thing that you really gain outside of what might be a particular or specific skill set relative to that discipline, I think what's really important, and this is me serving some self-interest because it's my argument for school. I think the greatest thing you can gain from training is, particularly as it relates to art, is figuring out for yourself what you think is good. What does it mean for something to be good? And then what I think training allows you to do is begin to pick that apart. And answering the next most important question, once you've determined that you believe something is good, why? Why do you believe something is good? Why do you believe this particular sculpture, painting, film, piece of music speaks to you in a particular way that leads to you believing that it's good? Why? Right? And some of that, perhaps a hefty chunk of that, is going to be subjective. Right? It's just going to be a matter of preference. It's going to be a matter of taste. And there are things that you think are good that I'm not going to think are good, and vice versa. Right? That's what the whole world is as it relates to art. It's wholly subjective. But if you're in training, or if you're thinking about it a particular way, there are some objective things that you can infuse into those experiences that might help more people think it's pretty good. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think the acting thing and my experiences with acting have allowed me to do is determine for myself what I think is good and what is the process, right? Take a drink every time we say process on the show, right? And the process to which I believe, based on my personal aesthetic, I can get to the part where I believe something is good. Right? I think that's what really, as I've thought about this over the past year, I think that's really what my background in performance has gotten me. More than the technical stuff and all of that, which is important. It's helped me define an aesthetic for myself that now as a writer and director, I can attempt to infuse into the writing, infuse into the direction, and attempt to communicate to a team of collaborators to help execute. Because this is what I think the nuts and bolts of this thing that I think might be good is. Right. I think that more so has been what's been informative for my process as a writer director than anything else. Determining aesthetic, determining for myself what I believe is good, and learning how to communicate that in a practical way to the people who help me make these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to build off that idea and sort of take the acting conversation in a different direction. You've got a really great cast in this film. I mean, you've got Jenifer Lewis, who is an icon in film, who you brought on to play this teacher character, who, for those who don't know, is based on your real life mother, loosely, who is a middle school theater teacher. And then you've also got a wonderful actor playing the shooter, and you've also got your real life daughter playing one of the students. I'm wondering about your process for building out that cast. Is there any thought about the dynamic of having your real life daughter interacting with this surrogate image of your real life mother, with you as the center point, as the director, both in that relationship and in the film itself, and what that's like for you on set?
Yeah, so as I expounded about the philosophy of aesthetic and all that jazz, I'm going to negate all that by saying one of my favorite quotes on filmmaking is a Scorsese quote about casting, that 90% of directing is casting. Right? And so I believe in that wholeheartedly. I knew my life was going to change one way or the other based on the cast, right? The script was the first heavy lift, but all the script really wasn't gonna matter unless I got the people who could execute it and make my life easier as a result of that. So yes, casting was, I brought a producer on, Rachel Jobin, who coincidentally is a former student of mine, did an amazing job producing this film. So she was the first person I invited to collaborate with me. After, the film is co-written with my writing partner, Ryan Romine. So Ryan and I wrote the script. Next person I brought on was Rachel Jobin. And the third person that was brought onto this project was a casting director, Allie Beans, based out of Dallas, Texas, because we all knew that that was going to be the next most important thing to, as best as we could, get right. We just had to get it right. So the one advantage that we started with was I wrote that particular character, the kid character in the film, whose arc we follow, for my daughter. That was a person who came along, who was as much a part of the film as the script. We delivered my daughter being a part of this process just like we did the script. So she was the first person we cast. She was the person I had in mind from the very beginning. I wrote those words particularly for her. So much so she never improv'd on set. She just memorized the words, And so it was great to have her as somebody's arc we follow through the film already set before we even went into the casting process. And it was really Miss Beans, our casting director, who, after she read the script, thought we should aim high in terms of the teacher character. She said, I think this script can reel somebody in who's a name, who'd be interested in doing something like this. And so I might have said this at DC Short, so please forgive me if I'm repeating myself. We had a pretty significant list of individuals. It's name every Oscar nominee, Oscar winning Black actress over 60, and we probably asked them. It's not that many, but we probably reached out to their folks. And we got a lot of no's. And we got a lot of no's because I think, we were told, one, so-and-so doesn't do shorts, not interested. And secondly, we're pretty sure a whole bunch of people didn't read the script. So they were either pretty convinced their person wasn't going to agree to do a short, or they thought, casting came back to us and said, we kind of got the impression that even if this particular person was interested, we weren't going to be able to afford them, even for a short film. And so, it was actually another associate producer of mine who brought up Jenifer Lewis. She was probably somewhere halfway in the list, like number 5 or 6 on the list, and we'd asked 3 or 4. An associate producer who worked with the film said, have you thought about Jenifer Lewis? And I went back and looked at her stuff, and she's primarily known as a couple of things. A prominent voiceover actress. She's a Princess of the Frog, and was a big part of this thing a few years ago where she opened up a Princess and the Frog ride at Disney World. And so her voice has made her lots of money. If people have any relationship to Jenifer Lewis, it's through her voice and her your children probably, because of that film, and how much notoriety she's gained as a result of that film. And then obviously she did 125 episodes of Blackish. That was a hit show on television. Played the mother on there. And so, people's relationship to Miss Lewis was the same as it was mine before working with her. That was, she's kind of a comedic actress who is a bit sidekicky, hasn't really played any lead, to my knowledge, that I could find, dramatic roles. As you've seen the film, we're asking the actress to do that. And I just, I really didn't think Jenifer Lewis was just not the first name that came to mind for what I envisioned the film was going to be. And so her name came up on the list after we got all these no's. And it was her manager who read the script, who actually read the script and said, oh my goodness, Jenifer Lewis is going to love this. I have to find a way to get her to do it. And I might have said this at the film festival, but I am still convinced to this day that Jenifer Lewis was the first person to tell us yes, because she was also the first person to read the script.
Yeah.
This is not to say that if I had to do it all over again, I'd still choose Jenifer Lewis over some of the perhaps even more prominent names that we'd asked before, or people who have more experience within this genre. If I do it all over again, I'd choose her. But I think she was so excited about doing this because she doesn't get asked to.
Mhm.
She doesn't get asked to. She gets asked to do the things that, was our relationship to her before this. And so I think she was really excited about the prospect of doing something that she was not asked. She has not been asked to do very much. And, it was getting to know her over the course of the, 4 or 5 months between when she got hired and we shot the film that I began to learn that she was a classically trained actress. And, even though the role she originated roles on Broadway, and even though it was musical theater, I mean, she came up as a professional in New York City on stage. TV and voiceover work and all of that was something that came like midway through her career. And so she's a stage actress through and through. She just, as I said, hadn't been asked to do that kind of stuff. And so she ended up being an absolute perfect fit. And then once Lewis signed on, we had to find a way to hire a unicorn. And the unicorn was this shooter. This will make sense to you and to people who might be watching this who have seen the film. You can understand when I say that was the most difficult role to cast.
Yeah.
Especially after we got past my daughter, who I wrote the role for, and then, a seasoned actress who eventually said yes. I went into that process with a lot of trepidation because I knew if I had these two people, this third person, this had to be nails. It had to be a perfect person. It had to be a unicorn person. And really the unicorn part of it was not, we saw a lot of actors who could do the Shakespeare. We saw a lot of actors who could do the scary stuff and, but we were looking for two things in particular for that role that just had to be there. One, could this person, and again, this will make sense to you having seen it, can this person bring to the role something that I can't give them or not, that's not in the text, or something that can't be taught? And that is a certain amount of vulnerability. All right. So we saw a lot of tapes where people got a lot of the technical stuff right, but they just didn't have that thing, right? They didn't have that thing. That was one. And then secondly, the other thing that was really difficult to nail down is once you had all these things, you could do the Shakespeare, you could do the vulnerability, you could do the scary guy stuff. Could you handle the situation we were going to put you in as a person? So beyond the actor stuff, right? Were you going to be, I needed to have somebody who had the personality as the person, not the actor or the character, as the person who was not going to be nervous acting opposite Jenifer Lewis, who was not in real life going to be a crazy person, right?
Yeah.
I did not need to hire a person who was actually this person. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I needed somebody who could accurately portray this person, but not feel like they had to actually be this person to do that.
Right.
So
No
that's
method
a
acting.
lot of spinning plates up in the air to balance. And Ellie Beans, she kept sending us folks. I mean, I probably personally saw over 50 auditions for that role, over 50 tapes. Yeah, and we did a series of callbacks, and so we narrowed it down to a couple of people. The gentleman you see in the film, Zachary Lane, and another gentleman, kind of our two finalists. And one of them's in California, and the other one, Zach, was in Florida. And so, I talked to my team. I said, I'm really torn between these two individuals, and I can't be wrong. I just can't. This is the thing that could sink the film. It would not matter. It would not matter how much of the rest of the film worked, because again, as you know, this is the centerpiece of the film. This part of the film has the work or nothing works. Like that was the stakes on getting this person right because of how important that particular scene is. And again, this is a person who was going to be there for one day who had to come in and nail that scene, And so, yeah, so many things had to go right with this person. And so I ended up doing a 30-minute interview with these individuals. The goal being talking about everything but the film.
Mm.
I wanted to know who these people were. I wanted to know how they got into the business, why they wanted to be an actor. I wanted to know about their family. I asked them personal questions. I said, hey, are you married? I asked them personal questions. It was the only way I felt like I could break the tie. Because I thought the next most important thing was that this was a person who could handle the situation that we were asking them to be in, the context we were asking them to be in. And it wasn't going to break them or bring up something in them that was really detrimental to their mental health or what have you. I really wanted to approach it with a certain amount of sensitivity, what I was asking this person to do for my film. And so, I wanted to know as best as I could who this person was. And I left those conversations not really having an answer. I could have flipped a coin, but I trusted my team. I expressed to them, I did those interviews by myself, but I expressed to them what my gut feeling was, and we just thought Zach was the guy. And boy, oh boy, I've made a lot of bad decisions. I've made a lot of mistakes, as much as anybody else. But that was one decision that I've made in my creative career that might be near the top of correct decisions. He was absolutely 100% the right person. Not only that, the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
So we got really, really lucky, guys. We got really lucky. We chose the right guy. We found the unicorn. It took a long time, but we found the unicorn. So I also hope, and just lastly, shut up. I really hope, however, that's too late, right? I really hope for anybody who's listening to this on the filmmaker and thinking about casting and working with casting directors. I know that story is a little intimidating and might even be a little scary, but I really wanted to expound upon it because I hope it's actually an encouragement. I went into that situation pretty doubtful that we were going to have to either compromise or settle for a little bit less than what we wanted in order just to get the film made. And I didn't have to compromise. Don't censor yourself as a writer. Don't censor yourself as a producer or a director thinking, oh, if I write this character or I'm really attracted to this particular character, who's going to be able to play that? I'm not going to be able to get Daniel Day-Lewis or Denzel in my, why am I writing this crazy character or whatever? When, there are people out there that aren't household names who are really, really, really great at what they do. Yeah. And they might be a household name one of these days, or they might never be a household name, but it could be a person who is perfect for your project. So don't censor yourself on character. Write that person. I'm willing to bet if you have some patience and you're really intentional, you can find that person. That person's out there. Maybe this is this is also a commercial for some mating website. There's somebody out there for everyone, farmers.com or something. But that's what it feels like. It's kind of like I kind of went out there and I'm like, oh, nobody's going to want to date this. Who's going to want to date? What person's going to want to? Can't find the perfect person for this. And lo and behold, we found the perfect person. It took some patience. It took a little bit of luck, but the person was there.
Yeah. And I'll concur on that as someone who's recently gone through the casting process with my short film, that it takes there are those times where you're like, I'm not going to find the person. Yeah. There's 4,000 people who've submitted on actors access and it's just none of them. And then you get the person, you go, there we go.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the character I wrote.
Yeah, you know,
They're out there.
If I could,
They're out there.
though, because there was just so much there, right? Like there was just so much in your answer. It was just rich. And, you know, you talked about not only just the casting process, but how that process shifts depending on what you're looking for and the kind of role, and functionally how that worked for you in different ways. And that's fascinating. And I love how you used your daughter as your anchor for this whole story and ended up building this around her. But then you had the teacher character coming in and providing a whole nother layer. And then it's almost like it's then accented with the shooter character. So it's like the three legs of a stool that together holds it together. And I really, really love all that. And I also love that you provided like that motivation for potential filmmakers out there. And I just want to also assure you that no matter what you have said before, you should say it again, because you never know who's going to say it. You know, all new different viewers watching this show today, maybe. But, you know, it did spark one question. And that was, you're very intentional about the script and the casting, the title, and everything. It's been very intentional. And I'm wondering, when you ended up going on set and you're actually filming, was there a moment or a phrase or an expression or person or something that ended up becoming a new they gave you a new sort of perspective or shifted how maybe you saw things and maybe influenced how you move forward in say post-production?
I get asked often, hey, what's how much improv happened, you know, around the Shakespeare or what have you, how, because you know how film works, you know, somebody says something or improv something and that ends up in the edit or changes, to your point, Allie, you know, maybe a particular interpretation or something. And the film is word for word. There are things that we filmed that didn't make it into the final cut, but everything that is in the final cut is exactly word for word verbatim in the script, except for one word. The day before we shot the face-off scene, Miss Lewis took me aside and she was looking ahead because this was the next day and she knows it was a big scene. And she said, when I'm saying this particular thing and he says, you're just paid to say that, can I say paid back to him before I say the rest of my line? And I said, sure, you know, yeah, I mean, that's not a problem with me. And so she asked permission to say paid. And so we got to the next day and she said it and she did it. And I remember looking at my monitor and thinking, oh, okay, you know, that's interesting. I guess she just kind of wanted to say it as a ramp up, but, you know, I'm probably going to cut it. You know, she doesn't really need that. Because she talks about the next line is that, you know, of course, I'm not paid to say that. You know, why would you say that? So maybe she just wanted to say it because it was a ramp up for her and it's something that got her into the next section. It's not going to make it in the edit. And I remember when we got to that section in post, my editor and I were like, oh, it's the whole scene.
It's the whole scene. It's a very powerful moment. That's a really powerful moment.
That moment,
one of the best things that happens.
It is. Yeah. Wow.
You know? So that was specifically something that, one, wasn't in the script, and two, completely changed, you know, what I thought that moment was going to be because of a single word. Yeah, that was for sure the one thing in terms of script to post to production to post that shifted and changed my interpretation of something. That was completely Jenifer Lewis's idea. And I don't know if I don't know, maybe I actually think she liked the script a little bit better than I did when she signed on to it. I mean, she was jazzed about this script. And I really think she knew. She probably knew what the success of the film was going to be before we did. I think she had a vision for this film. You know, she's told me she too thinks that it's better than what we shot and all that kind of stuff. But I think she saw the potential in this film, and she really brought. And this is another kind of sidebar acting lesson, I think, Kyle. She really brought all of herself to the filming process. You know, I don't feel like she brought pieces of herself. I don't think she downgraded the process at all because it was a 4-day shoot for a short film for this random guy that I've never worked with. You know, I never felt like she wasn't taking this process as seriously as working with, you know, Denzel or Whitney Houston or, you know, all the famous people she's worked with, which was just such a gift to me. But I think it's only on the acting side willing to do that, irrespective of the context or the situation or how much you're getting paid or whatever, that the moments of inspiration are allowed to come for something like Paid, right? I think if she was just going through the motions and not thinking about what was coming up the next day or thinking about what was necessary for the moment or whatever, thinking about her character deeply, thinking about herself deeply, thinking about the vision for the film, like if she wasn't really investing in what this thing, she thought this thing was going to be, she would have never taken me aside to ask for something like that because it wouldn't have mattered. You know, she asked for that because she thought it was going to matter, and boy, oh boy, did it. You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And isn't it just such a wonderful thing when that happens as a director? I know I just like knowing that your actors are so locked in. I had a similar thing with my short where an actor came up to me about an hour before we started shooting that day, and he said, "Do you have sticky notes?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "Okay, I'm gonna run down and grab some sticky notes because my character has sticky notes in this moment. I know he does."
Do you see why the casting matters?
Yeah.
This is why the casting matters.
So important.
This is why great casting is great directing.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, you
Equal
gotta
parts
have,
for the actor and for the person.
yes. Her saying Paid makes me look so much better than I actually am. You know, it's not my idea. It is such a great idea. That was not mine. And thank God
Yeah.
she
Well,
thought
it's
of
a
it.
collaborative process.
Thank God.
Yeah.
You know, the sticky notes are going to make people are going to, you know, think you're smart. You know,
they will
because
for
you
that.
cast
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I wanna build on that and keep talking about that character because it really is so interesting to have to have Miss Lewis playing that role. And I want to talk about something you talked about in another interview I listened to, where there's a shot near the beginning of the film where it's behind we're seeing this sort of wide shot of the theater, and we've got Miss Lewis's back as she's watching the stage and all the actors on the stage. And you said in that interview, you said that is the POV of my childhood. And I wonder if you can expand on that and talk about how that growing up as the child of a middle school theater teacher and having that as basically the backdrop of your childhood impacted telling this story.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to talk about it without getting emotional because it's obviously personal and very specific to me. But my mom, who's over 70 now, she for all intents and purposes raised me by herself. You know, my father was a military man, was in the Navy for 21 years, and I never had this conversation with my parents, but I think they had a conversation early on that they didn't want me to be a military brat. You know, I think they thought there would have been there's some value in me staying put. You know, I grew up in South Texas. And so, you know, my dad wasn't around very often. He was stationed in Japan and Spain, and, you know, he was all over the world. And I saw him maybe a couple of times a year. And so I don't have any siblings either. I'm an only child. And so it was my mom and I all the time. And, as a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, I have 2 teenage kids now. We didn't leave the kids at home when they were 5, you know. So longer nights, because my mom was a theater teacher and theater happens, after school, at night, through and after dinner. I would be the tag along after school. She would take me to her after school or late night rehearsals with her students, and I'd sit in the back of the theater and do homework, peeking up every now and then. And so, yeah, that wide in the film is a pretty ingrained Sam Henderson POV from his childhood for several years. Some of my earliest memories of my life are that, seeing the stage and my mother in the center with all the students on. I mean, I saw that over and over and over and over again. And yeah, I have to blame it all on my mom, because even through all of that, Kyle and Allie, I did not think I was going to be an actor growing up. I certainly didn't think I was going to be a writer or director of film. I was in my first play my senior year of high school. I did one play. I didn't even come to Baylor as a theater major. I was through high school. I was in the band. So my first love is music. Played the drums since I was a little bitty. Play some keys, play some guitar, did some singing. And so, I thought maybe music was going to be around. I spent so much time with band in high school. I did debate. I wanted to be a lawyer, I thought. And I got to Baylor my first semester, and I was a pre-law major, a business major. It's a really trying time in my life. I thought maybe I was going to quit school. Just did not enjoy it at all. And I remember talking to my mother the end of my freshman, so first Christmas of college. We were on break, and I said, something's got to change. And she was looking at my grades going, yeah, something's got to change. Or Baylor's going to change it for you because they're going to kick you out. And we had this conversation. I did some soul searching. And what I landed on was, if I'm going to be in college for 4 years plus, I want to do something that I enjoy. And whatever that ends up being in terms of job or career or financial, whatever we'll get to, which maybe is an irresponsible decision for an 18, 19-year-old, but that's the way I'm thinking. Hey, I'm going to be here. I'm spending this money to be at this university. At least I should enjoy it. And truly, the last time I remember really having fun was being in that play my senior year. I thought, you know what? That was the last time I had just like pure joy. It's something that felt easy and fun. Yeah, it felt like it was me. And so I said, how about I change the theater? And then that changed everything. And so that's why I say I blame my mom. We were big movie fans growing up. I've seen every Oscar ceremony since Unforgiven in like 92, 93. We used to fill out ballots, and still do. Those Sunday nights in spring were really meaningful to us, watching the Oscars growing up. So we always loved movies. Sometimes she would explain to me things that happened in movies and how they perhaps achieved a particular effect or whatever. And so she didn't know she was doing it, but she was kind of raising a little cinephile, that because I've now taken all of that and ran with it to integrate. Now she keeps telling me to shut up about movies. It's like, hey, it's all your fault. You started this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that shot, that half-second shot in the film is a microcosm for everything that I've just explained. It's kind of it's an homage to the to the baby Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And what a
It's,
full
the
circle
whole movie
moment.
is about my mom to a certain degree, but that one's kind of for me too.
Yeah,
That one.
absolutely.
There's just a
Absolutely.
lot in there too. Can I
Yeah.
just say that I think, Kyle, you are a mini me to Sam.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
really?
just like mini
The
Sam.
parallels
Just
are
like, and you're
ridiculous.
like wearing the same shirt.
Actually,
it's like meant to be here.
it's
I don't
funny
know.
from the
Completely.
percussion to not wanting to be an actor until discovering it late to then to then being in film, and it's
to
eerie.
doing the ballots
To
for
doing
the
the ballots, which we
Oscars.
did every
Yeah,
year,
always.
and what a cool full circle moment there for you having that doing the ballots together to now having a film that is that is 3 times Oscar eligible so far.
Fingers crossed
and
there.
I think it has a very valid shot at getting into the ceremonies this year.
Oh wow,
I do
that's
too,
very
but
kind, Kyle. Thank you.
I'd like to talk about something you said, and so as part of something else I do, I'm kind of in the self-help space, try to motivate people and encourage them, and it's something that I do. I wrote a little book, and I talk to folks about it, and something that you said really sort of spoke to me, and I need to say it, because what you said was you needed to find what brought you joy in life. And so you looked inside and you really thought about it, and you took that time to find out what sparked joy. And I just want to throw that out there, because if there's no other lesson that anybody takes from this, I really hope that they take that, because you have done that. And as a result, you are now living this life that you clearly enjoy. And as you said right at the start, you figured out what you want to be when you grow up, right? And that never would have happened if you'd gone into law or business or whatever else. And so I really love that. It also sparked another question, kind of like flipping it for me, because in addition to being an actor and a filmmaker, which you both mentioned a second ago, you're also a teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, what have you learned from your students? What have your students taught you, as opposed to what you teach them, that you have really found of value and that has impacted your life?
Wow, you have some really great questions. So I see where you get it from, Kyle. So many things from mom. Wow, that's a great question. Students have taught me so many things. I admire in my students what I see often in my students, a certain amount of perseverance. Again, I have been through their process, right? They probably haven't been through mine just yet, which I feel like is part of my job, not to be smarter than them or whatever, or try to show whatever, but kind of be a little bit farther down the road, that they might be traveling down to say, hey, watch this pitfall, or hey, turn this way instead of that way. But I have a lot of empathy for what they go through on a daily basis. I teach a lot of students who come from very diverse backgrounds in terms of resources that are available to them, their childhoods, and all of that. And I'm always so amazed how I see so many of my students over and over again rise to the occasion, and not quit. And it's just, I get so encouraged and I get so inspired when I see a student who maybe in their freshman or sophomore year was struggling, was a young Sam, trying to figure out what they want to do. And then they show up after the summer of their junior year and they have wings. They're not late to anything anymore. They're the first one to know their lines, and it's just, I get so encouraged when I see my students persevere, because it is the perfect reminder when I see it for myself. We speaking of mental health stuff and self-help, Allie, we are our biggest critics. Often we are our biggest doubters. It's so easy. I challenge myself. I challenge my students to say something good about them. I put them on tape. I make them watch themselves. And one of the first exercises I have them do is I say, I don't want to hear anything from anybody unless it's positive. say something nice about yourself. And we can spend a whole class on it because it's so hard for them. It's so hard. Even to get them to say, I really like the shirt I wore that day. They want to criticize it, right?
I actually love that exercise. I might have to like adopt that. And start
It's a tough exercise.
It's a beautiful thing exercise. I put them on tape. I have them talk about something that's beautiful to them. And then I make them watch it. And then I ask them questions about it. And my question is, what is something beautiful about yourself? You're talking about this particular object, but what is something when you watched yourself, what's something beautiful about you? You have to tell me. You cannot tell me that, oh, I look sleepy that day. No. Tell me something positive. But I'm preaching to the choir. Every time I do something like that, I have to turn around and do that for Sam, because I am the first one to say critical things or be doubtful or not want to say that I like the shirt that I wore that day or whatever, and so I'm reminded by students all the time, either because of something that I'm challenging them to do or something that they challenge me to do or think about, to, try to be a better person, a kinder person to myself, and continue to persevere even when the odds might not be favorable or there are particular obstacles that might be new or daunting. That, I got a saying on my phone. I'm using my phone now, but I got a saying on my phone. Hey, the only way you lose for sure is if you quit, and I'm reminded by that. I'm reminded of that for my students almost every day.
I want to talk about another thing that I heard you talk about, which in regards to the shooter character, you talked about, obviously we don't want to empathize with a school shooter character, nor is that something that we're particularly interested in. But having, I think I don't remember the exact wording, but having just a touch of empathy for that character, and what's led to this moment, and the building that relationship, it reminds me of the process that an actor has to go through when they are playing a not so redeemable person, and they have to find
the character.
Not judging the character, exactly. And so I was wondering if there's a crossover there for you. I'm sure you've played some bad guys in the past. I know I have, and having to separate yourself and know logically in your head this is a bad person, but also I can't be thinking that when I'm playing this character.
The crossover for me is, because of my training, this is probably going to be true for you too, Kyle. I am a servant to the language. I am always in a position where I'm thinking about what is the language asking of me? How do I service the language? So on the theater side, I really think that is the director's job, as the interpreter of the text. How can you get the actor to a place to where they're embodying the text means something to them within the vision or the style of the show? And so I want to go just about anywhere if it's in the text, and if it's well written, if I can justify it through the text, and so the preliminary conversations that I had with Zach, who would eventually play Bradley in the shooter in the film, was about that. I wanted to be, hey, what's missing in the text? Do you understand the text? How can I help you? Right. I know what my vision is for this character overall and how he fits into the broader story that I'm trying to tell, but how can I help you do your job? Is there something that's confusing about the language that needs clarification to help you, grapple with what's going on in the moment? How could I be of service to that? Also, leaving room when you hire a capable actor, leaving room for that individual's process, right? Because there could be different pathways to that in terms of interpreting or embodying the language. It could be different for a lot of people, could be different for everybody. But I wanted to be the bridge. And so that's what I'm looking for on the other end of it from a director if I'm performing. It can only be a bridge to the language if there's something that's not clear, that allows me to embody it so that I'm ultimately servicing the language, And I think that's for me, that's the barrier that I get to use, or the excuse that I get to use. Hey, it's not me, it's me giving myself over to the language, So I can justify it because this is what it says, right? And if I'm going to do this well, it's because I am committed to what it says. Yeah, and outside of that, I'm not interested in being bad for being bad, but if it fits within a vision that justifies itself as a result of the story, then yeah, I'm all about it, either as the director or the performer.
And I think that something you said in there, that just being in service of the text.
Yeah.
I feel like that is kind of the core of your process, whether it is you as an actor with text that you're performing, whether it's the text that you've written for your actors to perform in your films and in your plays that you've written, and even as a teacher, the text of what you're trying to share with your students and what you're trying to give them. I feel like that is kind of at the core of your process, service to the text.
You're 100% right. And that's what, if we have a few minutes for me to actually talk about something that I have not talked about at all
100%
too much publicly that I can recall. So we are working on a feature film version of Ado. And we've been working on this script for quite some time. And we're kind of we are essentially toward the end of the process of finishing that feature film. And to your point, Kyle, what's been so painstaking about it is how difficult it's been for me to really give over to the belief that the language is right. And some of it is, I will admit that some of it is overthinking. Some of it is, like I've talked about before, some of it is self-doubt. Oh, people aren't going to connect to this, like they're responding to the short and it's not going to be good enough and all that kind of stuff. But really what's at the core of any consternation that I have in relationship to it is the language. Is the language right? Is it just right? Is there enough in the language that when I cast this protagonist, they could give themselves over to it in a way that they might come to me on one of these days and say, can I say paid? Is there enough there that it's worthy of somebody giving themselves over to it? And so I think you're absolutely right. I think you're dead on. I think you have found me out. That
and got an exclusive
language,
out of it.
the text, the writing, that is truly at the core of my process, irrespective of what I'm venturing to do.
Wow. I love that.
Wow.
And I really love that.
Listen, I'll take I don't know if it's an exclusive, but I'll take the exclusive. And that's super fascinating, the adapting into a feature. I do have to ask, really are you planning on using the same actors, or are you going to is that too far out? I'm curious about that personally.
Are you trying to get a role?
Listen, I'll never turn down an audition. I'll send you a tape.
All of a sudden, this is an audition. Right. Who knew? This is part of the second part of the trepidation. The script that has kept me up many nights it is very, very different from the short. There is some of the language in the short, and the scenarios that are in the short are embedded in the feature, but how we get to where we get to in the short, the pathway to it is very, very, very different. And what it's going for thematically is very, very, very different. And so I think along with the title change, which I'm not going to reveal now, the title is going to change. I think because of how different I need the feature to be, that it's going to also require different people to be a part of it. If this feature gets made, the great irony is, if this gets made, if we ever get funding for it, it's going to be because somebody responded really positively to Ado and believes that me, my team, with some more cash could make something good as a result of that. But the trick is they're also going to have to be comfortable that the feature is not going to be the short. It's not going to be a do. It's going to be very different. It's going to be going for something very different. So the short might be something that allows you to make the feature, but when the feature gets made, it's going to be something that's very different from the short.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I just have one. I actually have one more question. It just came to me.
Yes.
It's a little bit off the wall, but if Shakespeare were to see a do, what do you think he would say? And if you're staying true to the core of Shakespeare, what do you think he would say about the feature?
Oh, the feature, he would be completely lost. Well, I guess the first thing he'd say is, are those really people inside that screen? What is film? Where am I? Why are those that you have in your pocket?
The lights are electric.
Gosh, that's an interesting question. How would Shakespeare respond? I often wonder about historical figures and how they respond to, one, how we view them today and how we view their works today. I think there would be so much surprise. You know, not to go off to another tangent from a tangent, but we were in DC. My wife and I were there, and we had a day off, and so we hit the sites, and we went to go see the MLK monument, because it's been a long time since I've been to DC, and actually the last time I was in DC, the MLK statue wasn't there. And then it's not too far away, so you can walk from the MLK statue to the Lincoln Memorial. And I remember going back to the Lincoln Memorial, and we were talking, and I just said, all these people here who are looking at this sculpture and reading these words, and Lincoln's speeches are up on the walls in the Lincoln Memorial, and all of the text, here we go, MLK's text is up against the wall. It's like, I wonder how they'd really think in 2025. First of all, they even think the world is still around, in 2025, especially relative to what those gentlemen went through. I think that'd be the first shock. What? We're still a thing? Humanity is still a thing? So God knows Shakespeare. Oh my gosh. The 15th, 16th, 17th century. There's no way he thought we'd be in the 21st. I don't know. My only hope is that he would think that it's a clever use of his language, and there would be so much explaining and that would need to be involved in terms of what the context of the film is and who these people are. But I hope when he recognized his writing, he would at least say, "Oh, that's interesting, Sam. Good job."
That's interesting.
That would be my hope.
I actually thought you might say something along the lines of, "People haven't changed. We're still
people
violent,
haven't changed,
and we're still
people
flawed,
haven't changed."
and, yeah.
That's probably to my other point. This is probably what Lincoln and MLK would be thinking, right?
Right.
Yeah.
With what we're facing with in this country, I think it would be unfair. I think it would be unfair because I don't think their work was in vain. So I think it would be unfair to say that things haven't gotten marginally better. I think things, especially if we're talking about those two individuals, right? So I think what they're fighting for, what they thought was right and all that, I think things have gotten better from that. But if they came back and the three of us had a cup of coffee with them, I think it wouldn't be too long until they realized they would be putting their head in their hands going, really? We're still talking about what?
Still talking about this.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank hasn't been solved?
Right.
What? What just happened? What?
I know.
I thought this should be old news. So God, Shakespeare. Oh my gosh.
Well,
changed. But of the things that have changed over the past 500 years, to your point, Allie, probably the thing that's changed the least is us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
hopefully the film will spark some social discussion.
I think it will. And more than anything, I think Shakespeare would be would be happy with the service to the text.
There you go.
Oh,
There you
I
go.
would hope.
What a nice way to round it out.
To round that out.
That was good.
Yeah. With that being said, I want to give the floor to you to tell folks where they can follow what's going on with you, follow what's going on with the film, find out about any festivals that might be near them coming up, and just in general, how they can keep up with what you're doing and what's going on in the world of Sam Henderson.
Yes. So, the film is ramping up. We are taking it to every place that will have it. So if you will please follow ado_short film on Instagram. We are not trying to inundate people with information, but we do update where the film is going to be next. We just came from DC. Next week I'm going to Cincinnati. So the film will be at Independent, where it's up for several awards. And it's Independent. I've been there before with another film. It's really a terrific festival. And then we have 3 or 4 festivals that are happening like at the same time in Detroit, Catalina, Cordillera in Reno, Nevada. There's going to be next month, we're going to Northern California. We're going to San Jose. We're going to Santa Fe. We're going to Tallgrass and Wichita. We'll eventually end up in Austin, New York City, St. Louis. And so, yeah, we've got a dozen or so festivals and screenings scheduled over the next couple of months as we try to get the film exposed. And, hopefully the key audience now, folks, is the 10,000 members of the Academy. So we hope they respond to our film kindly and remember us when they're voting at the beginning of November for the short list.
Wonderful. And I think that they will. I think it's a great film. It's probably my favorite short film I've seen all year, just on a personal note. So,
oh wow. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to see it if it's coming to a festival in a city you're in.
Yes, we're coming all over. So hopefully people who see this or people who are interested in the film will get an opportunity to see it through one of those festivals.
Amazing. Well, with that said, Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
And best
yes,
of
you're
luck.
welcome. Thanks so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. This was great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Bye for now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, Allie, what'd you think?
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wow. There was so much in what Sam said. A lot of process information and just how different the application of the processes are. And yet there's that core about really getting in tune with what the words say. And I just found it really interesting and inspiring, especially when he was talking about how he used his daughter as the fulcrum around which he has built really his whole new life. And I just found that really inspiring. And the film, again, for those who haven't seen it, it really is worthwhile. And I would encourage you to go. There's a lot that goes on there. The acting is stunning. And the perspectives and the shots. And there's a lot that we didn't talk about because, we don't have 6 hours.
Yeah.
But there was a lot in there. And I was just really impressed by all that. And also, I was just really impressed with he's just a down-to-earth guy. He's teaching school and he was an actor. And now he's doing his filmmaking and he's moving ahead and he based the character on his mom. And I really loved how grounded he was and how grounded his art was.
Yeah, and grounded is absolutely the right word. He's very down to earth, and his stories are about humanity, much like what we talked about with how Shakespeare's words still work because they are about humanity. Mm-hmm. His film works because at its core it is such a human story. Yeah, it's about relationships, it's about struggles, it's about putting other people ahead of yourself. It's really wonderful.
It's, yeah, the human condition in general, and you get the perspective of the children, you get the perspective of the teacher, and you really do that. The actor who plays the shooter does make him a sympathetic character,
Mm-hmm.
and you get the human condition of all of those perspectives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was impressed by that.
I was too, and I think it's you know, having to play against someone like Jenifer Lewis, who is such an icon, a legend. We've heard her voice in Princess and the Frog, in the Cars movies, and has performed amazing roles on television and film for decades. He is really giving a wonderful performance opposite her, and they are really, nobody's winning the scene. They are playing opposite each other and building each other up in that way.
Building each other up. And what's also interesting, though, I loved how Sam said, he never thought he'd have a chance at getting an actress like that. Like, that was not something. It was the casting director that first was like, no, you can go big on this.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting lesson for all of us, because so often we undersell ourselves, or we diminish our own the value of what we produce or what we create. And the truth is, man, go big, because you never know what might happen. And he ended up getting, and also how awesome for her that she got to play this meaty, I mean, yes, it's a short, but it's a meaty, dramatic role.
It's a wonderful role that people don't usually cast her in.
And she's phenomenal as a dramatic actress. Just really amazing.
It's not only my favorite performance that I saw in a short this year, it has an argument to be perhaps one of, if not my favorite film acting performance of the year.
Wow.
Including, blockbuster $50 million films and critically acclaimed movies that will get nominated at the Oscars this year. It's that good, folks. And if you get a chance to see it on the festival circuit, if it comes to an area even somewhat near you, I gotta say, you should
spend
catch
an evening. It's worth it.
Yeah. Take the trip, go see it.
Support
it's wonderful.
Indie films.
Support indie
films, man.
And yeah, it's wonderful that we got to have Sam on, and wonderful that he could be our very first guest on So What's Your Process?
Yeah.
So next week,
possible Oscar nominee. Never know.
Possible Oscar nominee. And if he does, we will certainly have him back again.
Shout him out for that, man.
And if the feature comes through, we'll have him back again.
Yep.
Season 2, we'll keep you in the loop with that.
Yes, we will.
And in the meantime, we are so happy that you joined us this week for the very first episode of So What's Your Process? Join us again for our next episode, which will be coming out shortly. And in the meantime, follow us on social medias and make sure to like and subscribe, turn on post notifications, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening on an audio platform, wherever you're watching. Make sure to stay up to date so you never miss a new episode. And in the meantime, Allie,
support indie films. And tune in next week for So What's Your Process?
Bye-bye.